Well, let's do this. This is our Blister Summit panel on next generation materials. And I'm very interested in having this conversation with the three of you in particular for some different reasons that I think will become apparent. But I thought, just to get started, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some backgrounds and the like. And so, Charlie, why don't we start with you? Give us a brief background on Checkerspot and the primary aims of the company. And I kind of have a hunch you might want to say something about Wonder Alpine as well.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, thanks for inviting me to be part of the panel. Awesome to be here. Good to see you, Dan and Peter, as well. Checkerspot is a startup. We're a young company. We started in the summer of 2016, and we're innovating performance materials by utilizing biology. And we're using single-celled organisms, microalgae, that can produce certain kinds of oils that we direct. And what's interesting about this is it allows us to get to chemistries biologically that you can't necessarily get from a barrel of petroleum or from like the big commodity-based vegetable oils that completely dominate the market. And so this allows us to optimize for performance features, physical properties of materials, by fine-tuning biology and by fine-tuning chemistry. And we now have 3 materials that are on the market. One is a textile finish that we're selling in partnership with a company called Beyond Surface Technologies. And that's utilized primarily on synthetic fabrics for wicking. We also are working with 2 urethanes that we have brought to life in backcountry skis. And we launched Wonder Alpine. We see Wonder Alpine as an extension of our laboratory. And we launched this consumer engagement direct to consumer 2 years ago. And we now have 2 skis on the market, the Vital 100, the Intention 110, that feature these urethane-based materials, urethane composite in the core, as well as poured urethane sidewalls. And we have a portfolio of additional ingredients and materials that we're in the process of bringing to market, either directly ourselves or through partnership. We have some partnerships with a Japanese chemical company, with a Swiss-based chemical company, as I mentioned, with Gore, which publicized our partnership a year ago, as well as one of the leading outdoor consumer brands that we haven't yet announced. So that's a little bit about what we're doing, and I'm psyched to be here. Thanks again for the invitation.
Peter, let's go to you next. Talk about why you started MountainFlow and what your vision is for the company.
Thanks, Jonathan, so much for having me here on the panel. And Charlie and Dan, great to see you guys. So MountainFlow is a plant-based ski wax and bike lube company. We started also back in 2016. And it just seemed like there was a huge hole in the market at the time. I've worked in the ski industry for years as a ski patroller and then as a ski tech in cramped, small wax rooms, just breathing in chemicals, which at the time I didn't realize what they were. But I realized that pretty much everything on the market was petroleum-based and that there may be an opportunity to make a plant-based alternative that worked just as well. And so that started a 2-year journey to try to figure it out and see if it was even possible. And at first, it seemed pretty obvious why no one else had done it because it was really hard. And a lot of the prototypes were really terrible. But slowly, it got better to the point where we have a wax that works just as well as anything else on the market. And we actually started working with Wonder Alpine this year. We have a collab product with their logo and our wax. So to get a vote of confidence from folks like that, Pep and Matt, who ski the stuff and say, yeah, it is just as good, is really cool.
Dan Abrams. Dan, a big reason for why I wanted to have you on this panel is because I think your perspective is particularly interesting here, because unlike MountainFlow and unlike Checkerspot and Wonder Alpine, you didn't really start Flylow specifically with some like next gen materials initiative. And so I think maybe the way that I wanted to hear or have you kind of start is to just tell us a little bit about what were some of the founding principles of Flylow. And then certainly over the course of the conversation, we're going to get your kind of take on emerging technologies and that kind of thing.
Unlike the other companies represented on the panel, we kind of use technologies rather than innovating and creating the technologies. And so Flylow gear is 15 years old now. We started, right around 2005, 2006. And the reason why we started the company was because our ski pants were all getting shredded and they couldn't last, like through the season. And, when we look at it from a sustainability lens, like our, main focus has always been about durability and, and providing the customer with something that was going to keep them safe and allow them to actually, also make it through the season with a pair of pants that would last the whole year. So if you go way back to the turn of the century to, like 99, 2000, if you wanted cool pants, they were snowboard pants. So they were super baggy and they were 2-layer and hang mesh lining and, just junk relative to our standards today. If you wanted stuff that fit kind of right for a skier, you were wearing, like your warm-up pants that were all from race heritage. So they fit over your langs. But again, they were like insulated. They were 2-layer, it was not cutting edge materials. And then you look at the mountaineering brands back then, and those were the companies that were using 3-layer material. So that was our idea. It was like, all right, how do we make something as cool as a pair of Burton AK series pants, as technical as Arc'teryx pants, and actually have them, like not be too baggy and fit over our boots. Like a pair of, like whatever it was, Hard Corpse was what I was wearing at the time when I went to college. And so I think for Flylow, we're always erring on the side of durability and taking technology that was proven, and using that to make this product that would last longer than everybody else's. And it was purely product driven and maybe selfish or whatever, but, it resonated because it was just at the beginning of this, kind of backcountry free ride revolution, if you will, where people were, willing to do whatever it took to get powder. And they knew that they didn't need to get in a helicopter to do it. Those were, the 24 pro athletes that could do that. So once you're willing to boot pack, sidestep, tour, but your main intention is to go down and ski well, enter Flylow into the scene. And that's kind of what we did.
Nice background, gentlemen. So let's talk a bit about sort of the pros and cons and compromises and challenges that come when you are looking to depart from standard or conventional materials. And Peter, I thought it would be interesting to start with you on this one, since, it's like these products existed and you wanted to come in and it was really about just like the goal was sort of same products manufactured better, right? And so maybe you could just speak to that a little bit more. And it's truly like, I think the basis of everything you're up to and trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big obstacles that we faced is that eco kind of had a bad tint, it puts a bad taste in people's mouth. Like they love the idea of it, right? Everyone wants to be sustainable, but they're assuming that they're going to have to sacrifice something. It's like I referenced like health food back in the 90s, like tasted terrible, but it was good for you. Like people just understood that there's going to be a sacrifice. And so for us, it was really important not to have an asterisk on our product. We didn't want it to be, hey, this is the greenest wax in the world. It sucks to go skiing on it, but it's made from plants. So like everybody should be okay with that. Like we did not want that. And so A, it was getting people over that hurdle. And then B, it was just a lot of education, right? People didn't know what ski wax was made of, right? It's like, I want this wax or that wax. It's just wax my skis. It's like, change the oil in my car. I don't care what it is. Just get them ready. And so educating people that there was an option now and that it was going to perform just as well is still something that we're working on all the time. And once people hear our story, they hear that there's, a more eco-friendly alternative. They're happy to try it, but we still have to get out in front of people and tell that message.
Just to clarify for people, when did you, I don't know if this is the same thing, sort of launch the company and officially start getting the product out there, but give us a timeline on that.
Yeah, so we launched the company in 2016 and we didn't make base wax. We made an anti-stick spray that went on top of your skis.
That's right.
And so we were a ski wax company without a ski wax.
Right.
Yes, the wrong side.
Yeah,
and everyone told me I should make a base wax. And I was like, you're crazy. I don't know. I do the top sheet. I don't know how to do a base wax. But then I realized, you should make a ski wax company should offer ski wax. So 2018 started our R&D and we launched last year with our plant-based base wax.
And are you already seeing a bit of that shift in terms of people? I think you articulated really well. People are like, oh, Eco, right, I should care about that, except it's going to suck. Is it too soon to say that you feel like that needle has already kind of moved in terms of that response? Or like, it's like, hey man, we still got a lot of heavy lifting to do here. What's your take on emerging attitudes, I guess?
We're definitely winning people over. And, we offer 100% guarantee on our products just to get people to try it. Like you might hate it, but just try it. And what we found is that most people, once they try it, they do like it. And it's also helped that we've got a pretty good team of professional skiers and riders that are using our products. So if people don't want to believe me because I'm the guy selling it, they can look to these people that they've watched in ski movies for years and years and be like, okay, if Chris Davenport is skiing on it, it's got to be good enough for me. And so that's helped us, move ahead with consumer confidence so much quicker.
Charlie, interested to throw the question to you. And pros, cons, compromises, challenges. How would you respond to kind of this question when one is looking to kind of venture off and depart from standard or conventional materials?
Peter just summed it up in terms of the con. And that's like when you talk about something that's sustainable or that's bio-based or that's renewable, there can be this tendency to think, oh, it's not going to be as good. Now, when we started Checkerspot back in 2016, we named the company Checkerspot after a butterfly, the Edith Checkerspot butterfly that is negatively impacted by climate change in the Sierra. And we incorporated as a public benefit corporation, literally calling out in our articles of incorporation the fact that we're established to do two public benefits, one having to do with environmental stewardship. So it's like baked into the core values of the company. Now, I don't think that you can necessarily have two priorities, one being sustainability and one being performance. And so for us, we've prioritized performance in what we're bringing to the market. It just so happens that the technology allows us to do that. When I was introducing Checkerspot a few minutes ago, I talked about this ability to access oils that you can't get from petroleum, you can't get from commodity vegetable oils. These have been available, they're naturally produced, just not in big volume. And so the big petrochemical companies, oleochemical companies have ignored them. It's irrelevant to them because they can't bring it to market. And that's what industrial biotechnology has unlocked, this ability to produce at big scale things that were previously not available at scale. And so we're tapping into these chemistries that allow us to get to better performing materials that allows us to prioritize that in what we're delivering in the market. So our focus is really first and foremost around performance. It just so happens that everything we're doing has this lens of sustainability to it. And by the way, I think especially after the last year we've all had with the pandemic, there's such an increasing focus on things that are existential threats to the planet and to mankind. People care and people are voting with their dollars. And I believe that in 5 or 10 years, it's not a question of whether you have a sustainability strategy. I think every business is going to be having sustainability as part of their business strategy because it makes good economic sense. And so we're also anticipating in that environment, in that world, we want to continue to have something that differentiates what we're introducing and commercializing.
Dan, I'm going to assume that you fairly frequently get hit up by textile manufacturers, people interested in having you check out this new fabric or technology, to get it into some Flylow products. I'm also going to assume that you are always kind of on the hunt and taking a look at sort of what's out there. So how do you think about this question of like when to consider departing from standard or conventional materials that you've been using and maybe have come to really like? How does that work for you?
I totally agree with Charlie that like it should be just like a given that, that companies are working on their sustainability strategies and that they are working on their diversity and inclusion strategies and all of these things that it should just be out there. But in the last couple of years, we definitely have now put more of a lens on it for companies. And so we need to focus more on it. We get reached out by technology, by the, different fabric mills, this and that. And, they offer up certain things. But really, actually, I have to attribute a lot of the successes in moving the industry towards sustainability to REI. They're like such a big fish in the room in our industry. And there are times when they will make a declaration that makes us all scared. Things like you must remove all fluorocarbons from the durable water repellent that's on your apparel. And that was something that came out a few years ago, and it was scary. At the same time, it was awesome because now we have this driving force that's going to level the playing field. And that's something that you and I have talked about a lot, that, currently what's happening in textiles is that recycled face fabrics are now the equivalent in terms of performance. They're now becoming more expensive because demand is so high, but we're all trying to do it because it's the right thing to do. And, you're not sacrificing anything. And if we can throw away less or use something that was going to be thrown away, that's better. But the technology that it always comes back to recently for apparel is this durable water repellent and fluorocarbons that, it's fantastic that in the race world, they determine that you may not have, high fluorocarbon wax. And so they leveled the playing field. Mm-hmm. In apparel, it's a little different because what we're struggling with now is that you can have a zero fluorocarbon DWR in a non-waterproof garment, something like I'm wearing, or a soft shell, something where if you imagine the bath, the chemical can wash all the way through the fabric. But if you put a membrane on there, you have inconsistencies. And so we see some of the brands that have jumped on board with, with this, a sustainability angle, that they have sacrificed the performance of their garments in order to get a head start on being more sustainable. But they've done it, and and we have talked to our factories about it, and they say, yeah, we can put a zero fluorocarbon DWR on your waterproof fabric, but it's not consistent right now. So we can't guarantee the consistency. And then it comes on us. Like, are we ready? Is it worth it to us to say that we're trying and we're going to sell you a potentially substandard garment, and say that it's standard, but also say that it's, more sustainable? And that's where at Flylow, we'll step back and say, no, we need this performance. These are people's lives in the woods that are getting wet. We need the garments to dry faster. And, and so then going back to REI, like 2 years, they gave us 2 years to get the fluorocarbons out of it. And we worked hard, and then they completely, according to my recollection, they didn't retract, but they made it so that they were like, no, okay, you guys can use shorter chain fluorocarbons. You can use, you can still use the fluorocarbon based DWRs, but try to do your best and keep on working on it. And so, I don't know, we get kicked around, but we're also the small guy. So,
I mean, this is a perfect segue into the next question I wanted to ask, which was kind of sustainability issues versus performance issues. And, there are some principles here, and I think there's a bit of a philosophy here that I really want to get your respective takes on. But the question I had was when in your own opinion, or in the, in keeping with the principles of each of your respective companies, when is it okay to take a performance hit, a major one or a relatively slight one, if there is a corresponding significant sustainability improvement? So Dan, you just said, hey, we can't really take the performance hit if we're worried about people being out backcountry skiing and getting wet. And, that's, you just, I think, have kind of given your take on that. Do you want to say a word beyond that, or did you okay with that? We'll move on to Charlie and Peter.
Yeah, I think that's pretty concise.
Charlie, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, for us, again, like, we're putting performance at the top of the list. Like, that is the most important thing. And everything that we're doing from an innovation perspective, whether it's the biology or the chemistry, or even how we're building, because, we're running our own manufacturing, how we're building the product is all through the lens of performance. So we really haven't been faced with a significant decision where we're trading on something like that. Now, I think, just building on what Dan was saying, I mean, we're also commercializing through Wonder Alpine a tool for backcountry travel. And when you think about safety, when you think about the considerations around a product failing, there's no room for that kind of compromise. And the other thing that I think is important to highlight, that even with our initial products, we're not as sustainable as we would like to be. I don't know if you guys caught that we announced last week that we were awarded B Lab certification. Yeah. And like, that's awesome. And people have been, sort of congratulating us because of what this means from a commercialization perspective. And I'm pushing back on that, because it's not so much about the marketing benefit. And I'm not saying that isn't important, because it is. But what I think is more important is the scrutiny and the questions and the process, and what we learned from going through that around how we can continue to improve. And the point I'm making is that we are far from perfect. We've got a lot more that we need to be doing, but knowing where you're coming up short, I think, is the first step in trying to address some of these issues. But again, I don't think that can be, at the expense of performance, of delivering a high quality product.
Peter, your turn.
Yeah, agree completely. When we were getting ready to launch our wax, we sat down with a wax industry veteran. And he said, I love everything about what you guys are doing, but you need to take plant-based, move it onto the back of the label, take high performance, put it front and center, because that's what people really care about. And they're going to say they want it to be sustainable, and they do, but they're not willing to sacrifice. And I don't blame them. And I wouldn't ask anybody to sacrifice performance just to get something that's green. And I really like the way that Charlie put it, where we're using sustainable technology to create something that's high performance and performs as well or better than anything else on the market. And, I think it would do all of us a disservice if we're putting out a green product that doesn't work as well, right? Because then someone might say, I skied a green wax, it's not as good. Like, are Charlie's green skis going to be any good? Mm-hmm. And it's like, if we're all raising the bar, then we're all going to help each other, rising tide.
Hey, Jonathan, can I maybe mention one other thing?
Yeah.
Like the framing of the question and thinking about this trade-off between performance and sustainability, which I get a lot. It assumes that we're crossing this bridge for the first time. And what I want to put out there is like there's history in the petrochemical industry of innovating new polymers and introducing those into the market. And it's worthwhile to go back and study that history because it's a history that's based on things that were available at like big scale and at super low price. And as those polymers were being introduced, the reason that they were able to get some market share was because they were cheap. But just eyeballing you guys, I think we're roughly around the same age. Like think back to the 80s and think back to plastics and think back to like that perception that if it was plastic, it was cheap. It wasn't as good as that thing made with some other materials. But somehow along the way, like in the 90s and the early 2000s, like that shifted. And we've kind of brought on board this mentality that if it's petrochemical based, that it means high performance. And it really doesn't. And that's part of what I think needs to happen from an education and an awareness perspective, that there are other ways to deliver and to create and to manifest high performance products.
Okay. This is a question very specifically targeted to your respective customers, potential customers. Okay. And Dan, I think we'll have you go first. Would you say that these days, right now, you are seeing more of a demand for performance improvements from Flylow products? Is that what you're being asked for? Or are you being asked more about sustainability improvements?
It's not being asked for both. You can't,
That's a
sorry, I'm going to play that card. Like you are, like everybody, they are going to your website and they're doing their research and then they're going to buy it from wherever, from the local store, hopefully, or, or online. And they're going to dig through and they're going to try to answer those questions that they have about your company. And it needs to be very easy to find and they need to know where you're at. And so I think people that the bigger question that I have is are people willing to pay for more sustainability, if it's the same performance as something that is, is not as sustainable. And what I found is that people will pay for, for more sustainability, that there is some, price elasticity there, just like people will pay for higher performance. So, I think I'm going to play both sides. You can't choose one or the other. Now, like I was saying before, now that the performance of recycled fabrics is at the same level, that you're not sacrificing for virgin nylon to get a recycled nylon face fabric, the price is going up. And so in the next couple of years, you will see us test that, that statement that, that people will pay for a more sustainable product. And, maybe we have to pick and choose where we put that. Maybe you'll start seeing those recycled materials in the premium product. And because that's where there's more price elasticity. And on the other side of it, on our lower end product, we have to use, more virgin materials that are arguably less sustainable. But we'll see. There's also, the elephant in the room being REI, and maybe they will make a declaration that they will only put, recycled materials in their, in their stores. And that could be pretty interesting and, and raise everybody's prices or make us all more sustainable. Could be good.
I kind of now want to conduct an experiment. I think I'm going to launch a company called Flylower. And we'll the marketing pitch is we are more sustainable than Flylow, but we are also definitely worse in terms of performance. And then we'll just see and then we'll just see, right? If you call me and you're like, we are losing all kinds of market share to your
only if you get Blister to do an honest review.
Well, it is going to be honest. We will say it is not as good. It isn't as durable. It wets out way quicker,
yes.
But it is more sustainable. And then we would get our answer to like let the market decide. Like, would they just reject us? Which I sort of think they should. But I mean, that would be the thing, right? Is like, can a company right now go be like, listen, we're moving away from certain materials altogether because we think the sustainability gains in the manufacturing process or the rest are so much better, but it doesn't perform as well as other materials. I realize we're talking specifically about garments now. Charlie does not like this at all. Charlie's like, this is a false dichotomy. I don't accept your premise at all. Peter's probably saying the same thing, but still, I think we should probably start Flylower.
I mean, you could consume market share for that first round of consumer.
Of excited, and then
don't. But if a consumer has a negative experience, it takes us, 5 to 10 years to get a consumer to come back. They need to go try other people's stuff and see that, oh, you know what? It was actually that I hit so many rocks on the tails of my skis and I'm in the back seat that I cut the bottom scuff guard of every pant I have. And actually that Flylow material, it weighs twice as much. And sure enough, it actually was more durable than these other 5 pair of pants that didn't last as long. But, people have to do that experiment themselves.
Charlie and Peter, I'll kind of put the same question to you. I think your answers might be fairly quick on this one, because it almost doesn't compute. But like when I was asking, are the customers or potential customers you're talking to, are they asking for better performance or asking for more sustainable products? I mean, you both are in a position where I think it's founded on sort of providing both. So maybe this question breaks down. Charlie?
No, yeah. When we launched Wonder Alpine 2 years ago, so much of the brand architecture and how we wanted to connect with the consumer and share what we were doing was focused on performance. And even the decision, that Matt and I took around, okay, are we going to take product to market? Do we have something that we have the conviction is high performance and is going to really impress consumers? Like, so much went into that. And then when we launched, Free Skier picked up the story. And the headline was "The Green Ski Revolution Has Arrived." And so Zan and the team, they were super stoked that, Free Skier picked it up and showed me the header. And I was like, Green Ski Revolution. I was so pissed. I was like, this totally misses the point of what we're bringing to market. And Zan and others talked me off the ledge, and they were like, no, this is if you think about it, imagine walking the floor at ISPO or walking the floor at Outdoor Retailer and checking out all of the brands. Everybody talks about performance, but everybody's getting material made from the same suppliers, quite often at the same factories, but with different designs and different tweaks, but utilizing the same things and talking about performance. And so the consumers are pretty accustomed to hearing my product is the best.
Yeah.
What they're not used to hearing is our product is the best, and we're being really intentional, thoughtful about how we're sourcing materials. So much so that we're vertically integrated and we can actually innovate that ourselves. We're not dependent on some big chemical company upstream on the value chain.
Peter, anything to add to this?
I think more often we're seeing people asking us for more SKUs, more verticals. We like your wax. We think it's green enough. We want you to make bike stuff. Like surf wax. I get an email every single day. You should make surf wax. It's a great idea. I should make surf wax. If I knew how, I would, and maybe I will. And, Charlie, maybe it's the same with you. Hey, those skis are super cool. Can you use that technology for X, Y, and Z? And that's what we see more than anything.
Let's talk a little bit about just the financial risks and financial opportunities of the time we're in, and with your respective companies when it comes to kind of this push toward next generation materials, and we can take that in the sustainability direction or the better performance direction.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some financial risk. The R&D process I found to be quite longer because there aren't people doing what we're doing. So we're figuring out ourselves, and we're taking research from different industries and saying, oh, this material works like this in whatever, a car wax. I wonder how it would work in a ski wax. But there's no specific industry knowledge that I can draw from. So there's a longer timeline, which is more expensive. And then some of the stuff that we're sourcing is harder to come by. For example, in our bike lube bottles, they're made from 100% post-consumer recycled plastic. Now, I can buy that same shape, the same exact bottle off the shelf, and the lead time is a week. But if I want to get 100% PCR, it's 6 months, right? And so because we're using new materials that folks aren't using, everything takes longer. It's harder to source. It can be more expensive. So I think in that sense, there's some financial risk. But for us, it's worth it, right? Because we're doing it soup to nuts. It's not just a green product, it's green packaging, it's green labels, it's the whole story. And it's definitely more difficult, but I don't see any other way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. And agree or disagree, if you tried to just come in and be another wax company or bike chain lube company and using kind of the same materials, I kind of say you have no chance of creating a business that way. That stuff exists. Those companies exist. Is that fair? So I see you've talked to the risk side, but on the other hand, you also would have no opportunity, I don't think.
Yeah, you can't out Swix, right? They're the best at what they do, and they make a product, and they're really good at making that product. So you're right. We couldn't do that, and I have no interest in coming in trying to do something that everybody else is doing because I wouldn't be able to do it as well. They've been doing it. And so it's finding something that you can do uniquely better than anybody else and that people want that they can't get. So you're right. I wouldn't be able to make a business doing what other people are doing.
Charlie.
Yeah. I think anytime you're talking about innovation or exploring or pushing boundaries, you're taking risk. You're assuming levels of risk. I think, the related question is, how are you managing those risks? How are you managing through failure? And we fail a lot, but the way that we're set up, it's about you failing fast. It's about the failures not having significant consequence. But that goes back to this concept of how it is that we're managing the risk. I think, the risk is worth it when the reward is achievable, where you have conviction and confidence that you can achieve something big and important. And that's what we set out to do with Checkerspot. We see, we were talking about sustainability a few minutes ago, even in the context of it, I described the floor at OR and the floor at ISPO, people want to see new materials. Dan talked about wanting to see new materials. Consumers want new materials. They want better performing products. The demand is at a fever pitch. So it's completely worth it to take the risk to innovate, to deliver things that are new, that are differentiated, that perform better. And I think, Jonathan, you also hit the nail on the head. It's not just about outdoor recreation, which is super important, but it's where do you go from there? How do you grow into other verticals? It's not a coincidence that, we were innovating urethane, and urethane is used in the automotive industry for lightweighting of vehicles for fuel efficiency. It's not a coincidence that with the success of Wonder Alpine, some of the automotive OEMs and some of the factories have really taken notice because we have worked out a supply chain. We have product in hand. We have a cost structure that they can get their head around. And so it's about expanding from there and managing those risks along the way. The last thing that I would flag is what's the risk that we're taking if we didn't innovate? Like, what's the risk? It's like, so often, like, the conversation comes back to the costs. What about the cost, the externalities associated with the environment? I mean, we're seeing this, we're living it in California with the wildfires in the summer. Like, climate change, guess what? You heard it here first, is real. Like, we feel it every winter. Every winter seems to get warmer and warmer. Like, we're losing the snowpack. Like, we all need to be doing something. We all need to take that risk, because if we don't, I think the consequence is even greater. And so I think it's more about how to manage risk, how to take chances, how to fail fast and with little consequence, and also balance against, well, what if you did nothing? What if you didn't take that chance?
Dan?
I mean, every 6 months, we have 2 product cycles a year, and every 6 months we are dreaming and we are innovating, and we are looking at, you're looking at product lines and you're managing the product line and, different fabric stories. How much risk can we take? Like Charlie was saying, what product is ready to get a tune-up? Okay, what's the first thing we could do looking into the tune-up? Let's look at fabric and, and what goes into that fabric. What are our options? What's the, recycled materials or sustainability that we can put into that? We're always thinking about that, whether it's the insulation, Primaloft coming out with a new, insulation that's using 80% post-consumer waste. Great. Let's try it. We always go into it. And so we don't worry about the cost of that. We actually more worry about the bandwidth of our design and production team, and how much they can do. So we try not to overdo it, because if we're successful, and we have this innovative product, it feeds the whole machine. It gives media something to talk about. It gives our consumers something to, another beacon for them to hold on to, showing that we are, aspiring to be as sustainable as possible. And then also, you're also not necessarily looking for new innovations. We, could be looking at a way to use, like Tencel or, some other renewable that we could use in a different way. So a lot of times using old sustainable materials that people couldn't necessarily apply to technical garments, we'll try it and see if we can do it. And then, the Flylow way is to err on the durable side of things. Because in the end, like, if you have a product that doesn't have to go to the garbage, or that lasts longer, that winds up being, like a very sustainable way to look at things.
Let's talk a little bit about greenwashing. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And Dan, we'll start with you. When you hear the term, or when people are asking you about it, what are your thoughts and what do you get asked?
I think it's part of that conversation that happens every 6 months. Are we choosing this fabric for the right reasons? We know that, that there's a marketing side of things. So you try to push that aside and you try to focus on the product, and check off those boxes. And, there are companies that, that put, that first, and put that, their marketing message and getting that first time consumers is so important for it. But, I think the latest podcast that I listened to that I, really enjoyed was the founder of Allbirds Shoes, and how, his whole focus was, making this ultra comfortable shoe out of merino. So using, not a new technology, applying it to a shoe, it breathed better, it didn't smell, and he liked the performance of it. And and sustainability is very important to them. And, and so they got that aspect of it as well. So, I know it's tough because we all want to, we don't want to sacrifice product, and, but we need to have it, we need to weight sustainability, and it needs to be a very heavily weighted part of the way we think. And it can be in this day and age. People are innovating. So at every turn, you can make that choice.
Peter, greenwashing.
Yeah, it's something that's certainly on our radar all the time. And I think that consumers these days are very wise to that. And, they're on every single claim that we make. And so to get out in front of it, we're our harshest critics. So anytime we're putting marketing copy together or coming up with a new package design, we go through and try to poke holes in it and say, is there a way that we could do better? Could we make this more sustainable? If not, like, are we using the best option possible? And then how are we going to communicate that to our customers? I think what happens often is that a company who may be making a product that is not green or sustainable, like, we'll make it slightly better, right? So it's slightly less toxic. They're using slightly better materials, and that becomes flagged as eco-friendly, right? Because it's not as bad. But there's a spectrum, right? There's like toxic, and then there's truly sustainable. And there's a whole range in between. But just because people are like taking a step in the right direction doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a green product now. And so I think having these frank conversations and having some transparency will allow the customer to see that. And I don't think right now that that's always the case. I think transparency is a really important thing, and it's starting to become more prevalent, but it's not across the board.
Charlie, thoughts?
Look, I think it says something when some of the largest, most recognizable, significant brands, even outside of outdoor recreation, talk about sustainability, talk about how they're trying to improve their supply chains. But when they go and engage with the factories and their suppliers, they don't quite have the buyer power to affect change as quickly as they might like. And I think that that's a really huge consideration and might be worth circling back to Dan on this point, because you are engaging with those factories. And I would bet that there are times where there's something that you want to design where the factory pushes back and says, nope, like you're going to keep you in this box and you don't have the right, order quantities, you don't have the right scale. But there are huge brands that experience that. And those factories, and the factories are being supplied upstream by material and ingredient suppliers, there isn't a lot of transparency. There isn't a lot of visibility to what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think Peter hit the nail on the head. Like, when you think about greenwashing, it comes down to that transparency. You need to be able to show what it is that you're doing that is better from an environmental perspective, from a sustainability perspective, and where you're not quite happy with where you are, what you want to continue to improve, because it's a journey. It's a process. This is a whole revolution that's taking place. And finally, I think it's really valuable to have third parties like B Labs that can go and weigh in and have access to the information, to the data, to really opine. Is a brand doing it the right way? Are they achieving what they're claiming to the consumer? And then validating that. But I think, it's not just about, I have a level of empathy is what I'm saying, that there are brands out there that really want to do better, that really want to be sustainable, that talk about being sustainable, but aren't quite there. And that's often viewed as greenwashing when it's really not their fault necessarily. Like, there are other players on the value chain that I think are far more complicit where there isn't transparency.
And if I could just jump in quickly here, I think one thing that's really hard for a brand to bounce back from, and maybe even impossible, is being dishonest with the customer. And sometimes greenwashing can come across as dishonesty. You can put out a product and not everyone's going to be a home run. You can say, hey, we screwed that up and we'll take it back if you don't like it. That was our mistake. Or if you can't, we can't get the 100% PCR plastic. We're going to have to use virgin plastic just because that's the best we can do. And we'll be upfront. Mm-hmm. So either, admit if you screwed up, or just if you can't do it as well as you'd like, but doing the opposite and saying that, it's greener than it is, I think is really hard to bounce back from.
You guys have sort of alluded to this and mentioned to it. I do actually think that consumers are becoming savvier and are asking more questions. And it does just seem, I don't know how else to think about it other than just a dialogue that needs to keep, I don't know, what does one say? Like, the dialogue needs to continue, and like there needs to be more and more of it, clearer and clearer communication, more and more communication. Because on the one hand, greenwashing is a really crappy thing to do, right? If some brand is over here talking about how sustainable they are and it's just not true, man, that is shitty. And on the other hand, and we talked about this, I think, Charlie, when you were out here in CB, on the other hand, if consumers are like, screw you guys, you aren't perfect yet, I don't love that either, right? And so I think like, okay, the only thing I can think, which is what you guys have been saying, and Peter, I think you've definitely just said, is like, that's where the dialogue, the transparency, keep the communication going. And I definitely think that like expanding, like, what do we mean by sustainability? And like durability is a big one, right? And and supply chain, and that's a topic for another day, But I think there are a lot of ways that we need to be thinking about this. And so, anyway, I appreciate the perspectives on greenwashing. What I want to do here, I think, is I want to let you guys get going soon. So I'm going to ask for some quicker answers here, but I can't let a panel go on like next gen materials before asking this. The first question I want to ask is about sort of near horizon materials, maybe some things that you have already seen. I'm just curious if you might be able to say something about something you've seen, or maybe it's emerging where you're like, ooh, that looks real intriguing in the particular, areas of product design that you all are respectively working on. Charlie, anything like that in your world?
Yeah, I mean, an area that, I continue to be really like spending a lot of time on and pretty fascinated about are the factories that we were just talking about, and apparel. And, you just think about how many, it's not just Checkerspot's technology, but there are other companies that are utilizing bioconversion and organisms to produce new building blocks that can be utilized for things like bio-based nylon and polyester and other things. And so, yeah, like that's an area where there's huge opportunity in integrating natural fibers with fibers coming from a bio-based source that allows us to move past petroleum and past the big commodity vegetable oils, but to get to things that are new, that have performance features that folks haven't seen before. Yeah, I mean, one quick example of that is, we've been spending a little bit of time just studying and figuring out phase change materials, which are materials that, when exposed to differential in temperature, have different physical properties. Like that's an example of an area that could potentially be unlocked by tapping this broader palette of chemistries. So that's just a couple of things off the top of my head.
Dan?
I mean, we're in the waterproof, breathable world. And so, we've been paying attention to shifting around with different air permeable waterproof membranes that allow you to have, to keep moisture out, to keep water out, and allow you to, to let heat and moisture vapor move through. So working with our factories and starting to hear that there are some recycled, PU, air permeable membranes that might be on the horizon for us is pretty exciting. And then on the other side of that, continuing to work with our factories and these different, DWR manufacturers. Like we know that there is that like Nickwax, for example, which everybody knows is almost a household name in the outdoor industry. They make a 0 PFC DWR that we can all buy and put on. Like when can we get a commercial application for something like that that is consistent? And so we continue to, to go down that road, and we're pretty excited about that. And, one of the things about us being small is that, we can't change our factory's behavior. But we do ask all of our factories what they're doing. And when we find something that we don't like, and if they can't change that behavior, we can always take our business elsewhere. So we feel, like it's good to be small because we can be nimble like that. And on the other side of it, we have, technology companies like Primaloft reaching out to us because we are small, and they're having us help them go to market with product that can be more sustainable because we're small and nimble.
Peter?
Yeah, my answer will kind of piggyback on Charlie's, but there's a lot of new, exciting bioplastics that are coming onto the market. And structurally, the characteristics are very similar to a petroleum-based product, but it's all derived from natural material. And so that really allows us to elevate the bar because we're able to get the same benefits as a petroleum-based ingredient while keeping it all bio-based. And it's still pretty new, and we haven't incorporated any yet, but we're definitely starting to work with some.
There was kind of a related question, and Peter, we'll fire this one at you. And I don't know if this is going to be a different answer, but if the first question was to like, what are you seeing right now that's kind of right there that looks interesting to you guys? This next question is more kind of distant horizon question. And this is more of sort of, I'm curious, like when you're trying to sleep at night, if you're like, man, if we could just get this thing that would do this, so this is almost a question about imagination, I suppose. And is there anything from a sort of materials point of view that you sort of like have been kind of fantasizing about it, but it's like, we're not, as far as I know, maybe not remotely close to that right now. What does anything come to mind like that?
My fantasies are still revolved around skiing and getting away from the computer and finding some time to go outside. And I wish I had a better answer for you, Jonathan, but I thought the near-term one was a home run. But any further than that, you did good on that. We're keeping the lights on, and I'll get back to you.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Dan.
We keep on looking into recycled materials and recyclable materials. So we do have this pie in the sky goal of like the zero harm jacket, where YKK gets us, like a compostable zipper compound, and, and Primaloft supplies us with that compostable, insulation and so on down the chain. And it's so pie in the sky. And then, you start running into these issues of, like, where are they going to compost it? So I think that the key is to continue dreaming of whatever material, that could do the least harm, while being as good. So we'll always be doing that. And as soon as we get one level closer, we're just going to push it a little bit further.
Keep it going. Charlie?
Both as, the founder and CEO of Checkerspot, but also an outdoor enthusiast, I think one of the things that is worth pointing out is how many times like we have that waterproof breathable garment that we take out in, really crummy conditions, and it doesn't really work that well. And this, like I was, Nike hosted an event a couple of years ago where some of their product designers were present, and we were talking about how they go about innovation. And I was describing at that time what was just the vision of Checkerspot. We hadn't yet really started we hadn't started developing anything, and they kept coming back to using polyester. And I was like, no. Like if you could, like, blank slate, if you had a whiteboard and, you could do anything and it was like innovating new chemistries, what would you do? And it's like, nope, polyester. Like kept coming back to poly. And like what excites me in the long term is how information technology is, and this has already started to happen, not at Checkerspot, but at other organizations, has allowed us to embed sensors in durable goods and in apparel. And right now, a lot of these application sets are around insight for the athlete. There's a company that has sensors in ski boots, and it will tell you how you ought to be distributing your weight in a turn. But there's a huge opportunity to get insight about the performance of the materials while out in the real world. And that interface between the real world and the material. There's a enormous opportunity there. And then imagine if that data integrated with computational capability allowed that designer at Nike to say, you know what, forget polyester, but I want this tensile property with this hydrophobicity, with this elasticity in this color at this cost structure, and could program that. And then out would come the actual molecules, the chemistry that could allow you to achieve that. Like that's, I think, the future. That's the distant innovation. It's the convergence of some of these disciplines that is enabled by information technology. Like that definitely has me excited, but we have a long way to go before we're there.
Two things. Scooter wrote in a question that's a really good one. I am going to try to exercise a modicum of discipline here and this has been a conversation specifically about next generation materials, but we have talked a lot about sustainability, and Scooter raises a really good question that we need to, I don't know, bring everybody back or, cover this at another time. But he just said, how do we think about sustainability in the world of the convenience economy? Can it even be green if I expect it to be delivered to my door in 48 hours?
Stop ordering online and go to your local store, because then it's, like at least you get the sustainability economies of scale, because we ship $15,000 worth of product in boxes. You're getting 30 garments in a box instead of one. But, is it, and is that convenient? I mean, I'd argue same day pickup is pretty convenient.
Fair. Good answer, Dan. But I think point here is, like, again, we're kind of been staying focused on materials. There are obviously a massive number of other factors when we start really talking about sustainability in the broadest and most meaningful way. And, we're going to keep the conversation going. Maybe not this conversation, but we certainly have not exhausted these topics, unless that was somehow unclear to somebody. One last thing before I let you guys go. We were just doing yesterday this panel on ski design. And, one of the questions I asked near the end was, what element of ski design do you like best, or what trend in ski design do you like best in the industry? And it was a pretty unanimous answer that everybody liked this increasing attention that's being paid to sustainability in terms of the construction. And I thought that was really cool. And, it's certainly on our radars. We need to keep doing better and better. Sometimes we need to accept incremental progress, I think. We also need to be committed to real and actual progress. And, anyway, I really appreciate you guys coming on to share your respective perspectives and experience, and, keep doing the best job you possibly can on these fronts. Yeah.
So, you do the same, Jonathan. Thanks for all you do in the industry.
Well, appreciate it. Gentlemen, thank you. And look forward to Dan seeing you soon, Charlie seeing you soon, like in a few days, and Peter seeing you in like 4 seconds. So, yeah. So anyway, thanks so much for taking the time, and good luck in your respective endeavors. And I'm sure I'll be talking with you all real soon.
Congrats. Thanks, guys.
Take it easy, guys.
Take care.